Okay, so I figured I would do another basement testing series here, this time comparing my Kyosho Pro X, which I showed you guys recently, to a RC10 Worlds car. I have a few different RC10s. I showed you guys the Tekin RC10 Mid, which is kind of it's a new build. I showed you the RPM Worlds Conversion RC10, which is it's supposed to be like an enhanced version of the Worlds car. And then there's this, and this I've run so many times. It's a really good car, even though it's relatively simple. But that's part of why it's so good. And I've run this against modern buggies in stock and modified buggy classes, and it's actually done pretty well. I've won races against modern mid-motor buggies, or modern for the time, like 5 years ago or so. So it's a really good car. And then the Pro X, I've never raced this, but I've been testing it, and I do intend to take it to the Vintage Nationals this year. I've never actually won the two-wheel drive buggy class at Vonats. I've come close. I've come in second place twice. First time was actually with this car back in, I think it was 2013. And then the second time was in 2019 with the mid-motor version of this car, the Rampage Pro E. So hopefully one day, if the conditions are right, maybe I can actually win that race. Okay, so we'll start with the Worlds car, and then we'll move on to the Pro X. Okay, a few notes about this Worlds car. Obviously you can see it has big bore shocks. The only other sort of non-standard parts that are on this, I have a B4 input shaft with a B4 slipper clutch. I also have the B4 aluminum rear hub carriers here, which gives you a lot more tunability for camber gain and roll center, so you can swap out different hub towers to make these adjustment holes higher or lower, so that gives you roll center adjustment. And then you have like 3 or 4, depending on the type of hub tower, you have 3 or 4 holes here for camber gain, which is quite nice because on the actual bulkhead, the Worlds car came with this extra hole here, which is kind of under the wing mounts. And then if you wanted other holes for adjustment between this hole and the original 3x3 matrix that you had on like the classic RC10, you had to drill your own holes. So basically, most people wouldn't do that. They would just leave this hole fixed, and then the hub carrier, the stock hub carrier, had one hole there, so you didn't really have anything to adjust. With these B4 hubs, you don't have that problem now. Now you actually have a pretty good tuning window. And some people also do run B4 front caster blocks with the B4 front spindle carrier that allows you to run hex front wheels. I don't have that. I just run standard bearing front wheels on my old RC10. But that does give you also a little bit more tuning, because the caster block has, I think, 2 holes here for camber gain on the B4 unit. But I have plenty of old RC10 caster blocks like this, so I'm less afraid of breaking these parts than I would be of the B4 parts, which are frankly made of crappier plastic and they're harder to find. Okay, other piece is with so generally I try to set these up to have like a 20-ish millimeter ride height, 20, 21, which usually is either arms level or dog bones level, depending on the car. So in this case, maybe you can see here, this is about 21 millimeter rear ride height. That is roughly dog bones level. Roughly, not exactly, but roughly. Okay? And then essentially, depending on how I mount the LiPo, this is a 4.2 amp hour LiPo. If I mount it all the way to the back or all the way to the front, depending on how much steering I want, I will have to change the preload, right? Because you're moving the weight distribution around. That's going to give you, like if I move this all the way to the back, that's more weight in the back. It's going to put more pressure on the suspension. I'll need a bit more preload to recover the ride height. Okay? And if I move it all the way to the front, I'll have to take preload out to, again, recenter the ride height. Okay? So right now I have it with the battery all the way in the back. There is some difference in handling if you move the battery up. But anyway, we're going to do the testing with the battery in the back. And then I suppose what I'll also do is move it up front just so you can see the difference more directly. So let's start with the RC10. Alright, so I'll plug this in. So yeah, maybe what I'll do is battery in the back, battery in the front, then the Pro X. How about that? Turn this on. Okay. This speed control takes some time to boot up, but okay. And this is running in blinky mode. Okay. This one I have running in boost, but for, you know, small space testing, doesn't really matter. Really tight turning circle with this RC10. Look at that. That's like, you know, my Tekin Mid has a very similar turning circle. Very, very tight. Handle is very nice. See how it jumps. Notice how there's no chassis slab, right? And this is the same sort of base chassis, if you will, as the RC10T, which has all kinds of issues with chassis slab. And I think that's because the trucks have wider arms, so that gives the arms more leverage over the suspension, and that's going to make the chassis bottom out more. You don't have that issue with the buggies. Look at that. That's actually really nice. You can really throw this thing around. I know it sounds a little bit loud. I think the spur gear's a little worn out. So, you know, it doesn't sound so smooth. Don't worry about that. This actually is quite good. Again, RC10's a good car. At least the old ones are. See if I can get it off center a little bit. Yeah. Well, okay. Really easy to drive this car. So, you know, it's just because I know a lot of the stuff I have here is kind of hard to find, kind of rare. So, you know, don't let that discourage you if all you have is an RC10. This is actually still a very, very good car. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the battery forward so you can see what that's like. Okay? Take these thumb screws off, take this off, this off, this off. And now I'm going to put this in the back. Let's see, alright, I do need these other guys to pick up the slack here. Now this isn't perfect as far as how to best use these phones. I'm just working with what I have right now. Alright, so now that's what the battery, I went all the way back, now I'm all the way forward. Okay? Let's see what that does. And I will recenter the preload. What I do when I set preload, I have ride height gauge, it's an low C ride height gauge, use whatever you want, and calipers. So I use the calipers to measure out this gap between the top of the shock and the collar. And so if I'm, you know, 1 millimeter too high or too low on the ride height, I usually, so for example here, I'll just measure it out. This should be, I'm guessing it's going to be around 22 or so. Actually, yeah, okay, I could probably go off a millimeter. So what I'm going to do is measure this out. What do I got? That is 6 millimeters, so I'm going to drop it down to 5, lock it in, and then I just hold this here, and I pull the collars back until it hits the calipers. Do it on both sides. Okay. Reset it. This should be 21, and that should be, let's try that again. That's a little on the low side. 20-ish. Okay, that's not too bad. Alright. And that's it. Alright. So we turn this back on. Do this. So now it's battery all the way in the front. Okay. Come on. Does take a while. There we go. Alright. So you see it does seem to rotate a bit more. There's more weights up front. Makes sense, right? And that does mean it's going to be a little bit harder to drift the car. So if you're on a low grip track and you're trying to kind of slide the rear around corners, moving the battery forward will help you rotate the car, but it'll also help you over-rotate the car. So you got to be a bit more careful when you get on on power coming out of the corners. All right? All right, let's see how it jumps. Pretty good. Oops. I was way off on that one. I'm going to guess I scratched the nose there. Yeah, a little bit. Alright. Not too bad. Oh yeah, see, that's where it landed. Right there. Is that right? No. It landed somewhere else. Anyway. Whatever. Jumps pretty level, which you would expect if the battery were farther forward. But really, like, I don't notice that much of a difference in how it jumps. It's more the handling. The handling's a little bit sharper up front, which you would expect, again. That's pretty good. Okay, so that is the RC10 with the battery forward and backward. It might be a little bit hard to tell just from watching it through a video, you know, how the car handles a little differently with the battery backwards or forwards. You do notice it though, like it is, you do feel it. It's a little different, and you know, on a surface like this, maybe not that helpful, and that's why, you know, to really get your final setup, you have to go to the track and actually test it. But anyway, let's go to the Pro X. All right. Go. I think the ride height in this is maybe a little different. Not sure though. This is, you know, this is a very drivable car, as I demonstrated the last time I drove this here. I just want to show you how the Pro X and the sort of classic RC10 Worlds car are really not all that different in terms of handling. You know, they're rear motor, vintage two-wheel drive buggies, so they're going to behave very similarly. I personally prefer the Pro X because it's just cooler. That was the slipper clutch, I think. This is also, I think, possibly lighter because of the molded chassis. Oops. Anyway. not bad. Okay. So I'll put this up. Let me just move this one back over here. Alright. So, I don't have a low-C double X, but if I did, it probably wouldn't surprise you if it also drove and handled very similarly. So, kind of the point here, I'm not sure there really is a point, but if there were one, it might be just to show that you don't necessarily need like something cool and rare to have a good vintage two-wheel drive buggy. You can make an RC10 work very well if you just put the time into it. And actually, I do like the way this jumps. It jumps pretty nicely. I haven't driven it in so long, I kind of forgot what it's like. So it is nice to be able to compare them more directly here. Yeah, so that's kind of it for now, and thanks for watching.